Before we begin, I would like to emphasize that this podcast is separate from my teachings and work at Del Seaton Medical Center. Any discussions we have on this podcast is for entertainment purposes only and in no way connected to Del Seaton Medical Center.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of a Life of Flow podcast. Today, we had the honor and the pleasure to have David G Armstrong on our show. David's a professor of podiatric surgery over at USC at Keck Medical School. And we had a great discussion today about his life journey in the world of amputation prevention and how he's essentially become a viral entity throughout multiple places in the world, both digital and in person. And I thought his words were interesting and inspiring. And without further ado, let's dig into it. Lucas.
Vamos.
Vámonos. Two vascular surgeons walk into a bar and come out with a podcast. We are talking everything vascular and not. Welcome to the Life of Flow podcast. Well, folks, welcome one more time to yet another episode of the Life of Flow podcast. I'm joined by my flow amigo, Dr. Lucas Ferrer, vascular surgeon here in the city of Austin, Texas, and your servant, Miguel Montero Baker, now in Austin, but practicing in Houston, Texas. And today we have a super special guest, a mentor, an inspiration, and a great friend in so many ways. And we'll get to that story when we get to it. But Dr. David Armstrong is a professor of podiatric medicine, a podiatric surgeon. And of course, it's almost like those people that don't need an introduction. So David, welcome to the Life of Flow podcast. I'm sure you've heard we have billions of followers, and this is a very famous project. Everybody knows it. So thank you for being so kind.
Yeah.
Flamigos, it is an absolute
Oh my
pleasure.
God, let's
New
not
and
do
old.
that.
Yeah. There you go. Oh, yeah, you don't like the salsisms? Oh, no. He was, I tell you what, MMB there to your left, not to your political left, but to your physical left, was inculcated to all of our salsa-isms many, many years ago. So we have toe and flow, tomigo, flomigo, Tosa Nostra. The whole thing.
This is
That's
great.
funny.
This is great.
How about Vaya con Dedos? Do you like that one? Yeah, there's just bunch.
Yeah, they're just endless. Huh?
Oh, no. They don't finish. The soul to my flow, and we every day he would come up with a new one, and it was just very great.
BFFF, best foot friend forever.
Very great.
I'm noticing that did you just have an oral glucose tolerance test there with that Coke there that you have there?
Well, you know what? It's not only a Coke; it's a Mexican Coke. So
there we are.
It's essentially 40 scoops of sugar, and yes, we're going to take that off.
Concentrated, yeah.
I don't know who left that. Probably somebody doing a podcast before us, because we would never condone sugary products. Anyway, David, you and I came to each other's, got to know each other. I want to say 2009, 2010. As I had stumbled on a phenomenal opportunity as a young vascular surgeon. I graduated in Costa Rica. I was in Germany. And then there was this new opportunity because the University of Arizona had opened a vascular surgery integrated program. And so this one out-of-the-match position was there. And through Luis Leon, I got contacted to Joe Mills.
Have you interviewed Luis yet?
I have not. No.
Oh, well, there you go. That could be a whole separate thing.
100%. He's a great. That's a great idea. We'll have to have Luis here. He has a very
much more. I don't know if you've interviewed Mills yet, but Mills dull, Luis
monotone.
Yes, that's what I mean.
He's very German.
Yeah. Our current president of the SBS. I'm glad that we're
El Presidente.
Yeah.
But anyway, we met that, and that's it. That's how we've become friends. I was very inspired by the. I always say this. This is how I say it. I say that through my career in Germany, I became a great technician. I could do any. I could put a wire wherever I wanted. I could put but when I got to work with these guys, I became a good doctor. And it's because of the understanding of the balance and the finesse between the neuropathic component, the neuroischemic component, the ischemic purely component, and everything that you guys really had developed to that point. And so maybe for those of you out there that haven't had the pleasure of getting to know David and all of what he represents for us, limb preservation specialists around the world, David, I would love if you summarize a little bit of your career path and as a podiatric surgeon, were you enlightened into this, or did you come to just have to like it? And when did you get enamored with the whole limb preservation part of things?
Well, Miguel, look, I guess I was sort of born into this. My father, is the smartest guy I ever knew, was I think the first guy in our family to go to college, the first guy in a long, line of this family. And I think he was the grandson of a rabbi on one side and the other side. It's a long story there, but this guy ultimately went to college in New York after being brought up in the projects. In growing up with him and growing up in his office and with my mom too, also helping out, I saw that, this had done so much for my family, and that I wanted to ultimately pay it forward. Although I was thinking about doing a lot of other things. Strangely, this humble little area, the foot, became really attractive, because at that time I saw that there were very few specialties in medicine or surgery where someone could walk in hurting and walk out feeling better. I saw that early on, and for someone who likes instant gratification, well, that was spectacular. And it's pretty funny now that I've kind of gravitated toward the opposite, where success is often measured in millimeters, and our patients don't get instant gratification because they because the folks we treat don't have the gift of pain, and so healing often goes millimeter by millimeter in fits and starts. But no, that's how things got started. I grew up with this and felt like I kind of had to pay it forward a little bit with all the work that I saw him doing for this little specialty. I became interested in kind of the high risk foot, if you will, when I was a surgical resident, and I was in Detroit. I remember that really well as well. I remember having treated the day before. I had just treated a high performance athlete, college athlete, in the operating room, and I just put a really big screw across a really big joint, and it felt really testosterone inducing. and so the next day we were going to discharge this patient. He's a big guy, 6'8", and I felt like I had helped him a little, even as just an intern doing, turning a screw. And so we wheeled him over to our clinic, and as I'm waiting for him to get undressed for his dressing so we could change it and then have him go on his way and discharge him, I saw this little lady next door, and I wanted to help in clinic because we were taking up a room. So this little lady next door wasn't 6'8", she was like 4'8", and she was from India. No kidding, you guys. And she was like just off the airplane, whole family in this little room, and she, there must have been 5 people in this room, and the oldest son was in kind of translating for her. And she had a little wound on her foot, like just on the bottom of her foot. By the way, when I show a hand, that means, for me, I'm a foot doctor, so everything's a foot. So she had a little wound on her foot. And, I knew sort of that, you had to go and you had to clean up that wound and maybe just make it bleed. I didn't quite know what I was doing then. I know a little more now, but only slightly. But I'm working on her and I'm asking her questions. And it turns out that, she has leprosy and diabetes. So she has this double whammy of neuropathy. She worked, interestingly, as a cook in this where she lived in a clinic, and it was like a colony, if you will, of Hansen's disease. And I'm looking up at her hands, and if you all don't know, people with leprosy, they lose what one of my mentors, Paul Brand, used to call the gift of pain. They lose the ability to feel when they should be having pain, just like with diabetes. Anyway, so as I'm looking at this wound on her foot and I'm trimming it, and she's bleeding, and I'm trying to hold pressure there, I'm looking at her hands, and the ends of her hands are burnt. And it turns out she served as a cook, and she would reach into the oven and turn the naan bread over. And she had she just burned her hand. And I'm thinking to myself, and she was peaceful as can be, right? And I'm watching her bleeding onto the floor, peaceful as can be. And then I step back and I see this other room, literally right next door. And this big guy screaming in pain, 6'8", giant. And I said to myself, man, eeny, meeny, miny, mo, treating the presence of pain is really pretty great, right? You can help people as a doctor in treating symptoms, but what about treating the absence of symptoms? Man, no one teaches you how to do that as a nurse or a doctor, physician, surgeon. So that's where it's at. And so ever since then, that was like my first and second day as an intern, I really became fascinated with this. So I just wrote everyone I knew, including this guy, Paul Brand, that had treated people with leprosy, and Andrew Bolton, and Gary Gibbons, and Frank LaJour, all these people that have been writing about this in the 70s and 80s, and I just tried to copy them. So that's kind of how things got started. So that's my long soliloquy. I'm going to shut up now. Back to you guys.
That's super interesting. It lays the foundation of these moments, these unique moments where everything conspires to push you in the direction where you should have gone. And it helps in many ways to people out there. Remember, if you don't feel like you're in the right direction, it's going to happen. You just have to be attentive, right? And if it doesn't happen for you, just remember, any, mini, miny, mo, choose the lady without the toe. And that's the way to go.
Dude, you guys are full of these like little.
All right.
So how did you end up in New Mexico?
Bridge, Arizona.
Arizona.
Bridge to when you become a salsa builder. When are you a taco specialist?
Well, so look, the only thing I've ever done above average, I'm pretty much below average. Most people, all people know pretty much that I'm pretty, that know me, that I'm pretty much below average in most things. Just ask my long-suffering, much better half, Tanya. But
say hello to Tanya.
Oh, I will definitely. She's already says hello to you, by the way. She knew we were going to be doing this, so she already says she's sorry, by the way, for whatever. Since I don't have much of an internal monologue. So but the bottom line is that the only thing I do above average maybe is put weird ideas and weird people together. Everything else pretty much below average. But on that note, after Detroit, I wanted to. I was thinking about going back to work with my dad. And you want to talk about eeny, meeny, miny, mo again? You know, my father had this spectacular practice. I mean, anyone that had any common sense would go, especially since that's the thing that sort of attracted me to just getting into into this area, sort of the healing arts, as it were, was my father. And we literally had already put a down payment on this house, Tanya and I, in near where I grew up in Santa Maria, and it was a beautiful place. And I got a fax. This is back when faxes exist, and it was an advertisement for this fellowship at University of Texas in San Antonio, and not too far from where you guys are. And I didn't know much about Dr. Harkless, Larry Harkless, but I knew that San Antonio had because I've been reading stuff, and San Antonio had a high rate of diabetes, and this was a limb preservation kind of diabetic foot fellowship. I thought, okay, well, so I remember calling up my parents, and after I spoke to Tanya, and we ultimately said, oh, let's just give it a go, give it a year, and so I did that, and that's where I met one of my first kind of flow amigos, not only Larry Harkless, who's my great mentor, but Larry Lavery. And he and I kind of, he was an assistant professor back then, and I was a junior faculty as a fellow. And boy, I thought I was going to teach these yokels how to, how to do all this, because I just done like 2,000 or 3,000 cases as a resident. It was amazing, all the volume we did. But boy, did I realize that these guys had already forgotten, more than I knew. Lavery and I didn't get along very well at all, because I figured I'd written 3 or 4 or 8 or 9 papers that already as a resident, and he was already well underway. But the two of us really dove into this together as frenemies. I'm kidding, we weren't frenemies. We became really, really close, and I think we ended up writing 28 or 30 manuscripts that year, even amidst an amazingly busy clinical schedule. We just didn't sleep much, but it was enormously gratifying. At the end of that fellowship, you want to talk, because I know you were talking about kind of decision trees again, and I remember being in the OR like usual, at 2 a.m, and with some patient with a terrible infection like a necrotizing fasciitis, and I'm in there with Larry Harkless, who's my great mentor there, and he's another great guy for you guys to have. You really need to interview Harkless. And Harkless says to me, because we're the only 2 people there, the other residents were off taking boards, and he says, "Dave, don't go. What'll it take for you to stay?" This is what he said to me.
He does speak like that,
and so I said
exactly how it sounds,
because it was like the middle of the night, and so I anyway, it was like 2 a.m. At like 5:36, I get home, and I asked, I talked to Tanya, and then we called over to California another couple hours later, and again woke up my parents, and and then tried to talk to them, and they said, you know what? Because I thought it was going to be the hardest decision that they'd ever have to make. But they said, "You know what, son? Follow your star." And I never, and you have to ask, what is it that makes a good son or a good daughter, right? Is it someone that minds the store, all right, and goes home and takes over the business and tries to advance it? And yes, absolutely, that's absolutely part of what makes a good son or a good kid. Is it someone who takes what their family have given them and tries to pay it forward? Yes. So there's really no good answer. These are both correct, and thankfully my parents at that time, this is 30 years ago, give or take, said give it a go, and that was quite a long time ago, but we did, and that's the way things kind of took off. There was really no real specialty in this area, if you will. I was one of the first fellow in that to come from outside of University of Texas, but then this started to grow. We built a whole unit there at the Texas Diabetes Institute in Bexar County with our limb preservation program. I moved several years later to Arizona for the first kind of tour to help build a research program at our VA, while at the same time doing some PhD and MD work and master's work in Manchester in the UK. I was then recruited as to be a dean for research in Chicago. And at that time in Chicago, I'm going to bring you to that, to Joe Mills. We were trying to recruit Joe out to Chicago. And when he was getting recruited into University of Chicago, we were trying to develop this whole pan kind of Chicagoland limb preservation program. And Joe was, this whole thing almost got there, and then it fell apart at the last minute because 2 of the 6 hospitals we were trying to work with, go figure, weren't getting along. So at the same time, depending on who you ask, I think the story gets a little different, but I think there was a bit of a reverse recruit, and I was recruited out to Arizona again, this time specifically, not just to the VA, but to the U of A. And Joe and I my Flomigo Prime, as I call him, started a program. Again, we don't. One of the only things we do well is make acronyms, and we call it the Southern Arizona Limb Salvage Alliance. Our program now is called the Southwestern Academic Limb Salvage Alliance. I had to preserve the acronym, the SALSA, to keep the whole salsa bowl.
Never changed the salsa.
But back then we developed this program where it was just a podiatric surgeon and a vascular surgeon together in one hallway. And I think Miguel remembers the hallway pretty well if he was there in 2009, man. But literally we just were bumping into each other and kind of constantly arguing. Our medical students, residents, fellows all said, "My God, they needed a restraining order." But our patients loved it because they were. It was like a soap opera. It was like a telenovela, but just with with a toe doctor and a flow doctor. It wasn't quite as sexy.
That's riveting.
It was incredibly entertaining.
Yeah.
Oh my God. You would want to be a fly on the wall in clinic. Because
you
David,
and Ross were just
David
like,
is bubbly, right?
Yeah.
Like, and creative and, brainy and comes up with these things and has a way with words and kind of is going. And then Joe's this kind of like, potato with no salt.
Yeah.
And he had all this stuff always going on.
Here's this.
Oh my God. I hope he never listens to this, but he had all these, he's gotten quite more salty and, throughout the years. And,
it's getting better and better.
His grandkids and all these, and now he's really flourished into a really happy grandpa guy.
Can I tell a story about Joe Mills?
Wait.
So
the thing was that Jay would bring this thing, and then Joe would be like always like either doing something or absolutely annoyed because of some administration issue, and it was just this back and forth, and then out of that whole craziness, you would like you'd get lost as a trainee trying to figure out what the hell was happening here. But then out of that, at some point you realize that they've gone through ultrasounds, B, checked angiographies, D, gone in and out of the patient's room 2 or 3 times, collaborated back and forth, and at the end there was this consensus. And now there's a plan, and then you would see these patients super happy. And we already know what the plan is. And let's say podiatry is going to run with the ball, or vascular is going to run with the ball, and then we're going to come back. And so that back and forth, minus the theatricals, is really the basis of, I would say, contemporary chronic limb threat and ischemia care. Because we're talking at the point where a lot of these books and articles weren't even written. Right? I mean, the Journal of Vascular Surgery, when is the year when the Journal of Vascular Surgery publishes that I would say milestone where there's the first JVS just shows podiatric medicine and the Society of Vascular Surgery coming together and creating this consensus. This was a very important moment.
It was that. So that same year, 2009, when you were getting that, when you got there, we brought in leadership from the toe and flow, right? We brought in from the APMA, the national associations, and the SVS, including executive directors, et cetera. It was great. There's a great old picture of that. I'm sure you can put it in the show notes if you want. But we brought them all together in this one room in the La Paloma Resort there in Tucson. Do you remember that?
That's good. Yeah, it's beautiful.
That's right.
Westin La Paloma.
There you go. La Paloma. You call it a dove. I call it a pigeon. And so we just were in there literally in just a couple of hours. Well, a few hours really. We sort of hammered out the structure of an alliance between entities between podiatric and vascular surgery that then led to the next. In a year, believe it or not, we had the first ever dual issue of the 2 flagship journals, the JVS and JAPMA, which had a real interdisciplinary kind of podiatric kind of team care, and looking at the best available data, the kind of history of this whole idea and maybe the way forward. And that was, I think, 2010, if I'm not mistaken. I think at that time, it was you had it was just a great. You had Pat Claggett as the SVS president. You had a whole great group of people who was within leadership in APMA, and then that moved on to other membership with Tony Sadawi in the SVS at the time, and then it just really took off after that, with clinicians around the United States, around the world, kind of coming together to the best of their abilities to develop these interdisciplinary centers, and now it's getting a lot less exotic than it used to be. But these things take a long time. We're all so kind of navel gazing in our own little career, sort of solipsistic, if you will. It's like our own thing, right? But we're not. But our own careers are relatively short in the big scheme of things. But if you look at this, even in my little career, when I was coming up, there was not even an ER doc. I mean, what we now call ER docs were just physicians or surgeons, and they were moonlighting, doing something else. Yeah. There weren't pain management doctors. There were not hospitalists, as we call them, or hospital internal medicine. I think what you're seeing is the emergence of kind of an interest in limb preservation, where, back then, early on, it was just easier, just conceptually easier to say, let's just cut it off and be done with it. Just for the surgeon, for the physician, they said, let's just be done with this. Ms. Garcia, she has a wound. She's just going to get another wound. Why do we even bother? But now we know that that's if for most of our patients, probably not the best treatment. But bringing people together is how that happens.
I'm gonna say one story in defense of the non-blandness of Joe Mills.
I love this because
you're not gonna let this story
I'm
go.
not gonna let this go because this is such a good story.
There you go.
We were at Texas Children's. This teenager had been shot in the knee through and through and had a venous injury. So we were in there exploring. We were operating, and this was at the time Despacito came out, right? So we're operating, and then I'm just focused and operating, and then I hear in the background somebody singing Despacito, and then I look up, and Joe Mills is singing Despacito, and I was like, Dr. Mills, you know this song? And he says, what? Do I live under a rock or something like that? And then I guess a question is, so you were there at the start of the nascency of a limb preservation program. What is the structure of a modern limb preservation program? Because here where I work, we don't have a structured limb preservation program. It's like one of our goals, and obviously I was at Baylor with Dr. Mills and Dr. Ross and Miguel. But what does a modern, 2023 limb preservation program look like?
Would you mind, David? Would you mind framing that question to also appease to another observation of Lucas, which is, by the way, I'm very disappointed. You trained with us. I would expect that you would go and immediately build one of these, but for some reason, so frame it, David, if you want, if you will. The answer is, from that point, that seems that you guys set the stage and the needs in the document to at least give some direction.
Yeah.
Why has it not been adapted? And now to Lucas's question, do we need to be modifying that first version, that first pass of what a modern and more acceptable team approach should be?
Well, I think now, as I said, I think it's there are models that people can copy, right? And then they can improve on it locally and kind of go from there. You can kind of be, even though kind of in the United States, kind of podiatric and vascular are really ideal to kind of bring together in this. If you want to talk about just the atomic minimum of clinicians, you can obviously surround that with other clinicians that are looking after these patients, like obviously diabetology, superb nursing, nurse case managers, prosthetists, orthotists, infectious disease doctors, doctors, physical medicine and rehabilitation, physical therapy and occupational therapy, behavioral health, dietitians, of course. But the core is that if you want to check as many things off the box with just the minimum number of people. But what we're seeing now is that this could be, you could have core people that are different, completely different specialists. There are superb ones where there is a nurse that is a primary kind of cult of personality running one of these things and bringing other people in. Is it ideal to try to get some of these other people together like herding cats? No, but it can work. Infectious disease could be a good part of that. Even an interested orthopedist could come in and participate, like you do see occasionally, depending on where you are in the world with this whole area. We could be kind of, like I said, evangelical about the problem, but agnostic kind of to specialty. And so this is what this is what we see now. And so we've really listed kind of the things that you need to check off. A lot of that now has been published. I literally just got back from Australia just under maybe 30 something hours ago. And there is now an entire program there that talks about accreditation now for diabetes centers, but also for limb preservation centers diabetic foot centers within these sort of centers. So this sort of thing exists. And that is another reason why we developed, we were talking briefly before we were getting started about ALPS, the American Limb Preservation Society. God knows we didn't start another society, I'd rather have the skin slowly ripped from my face than have another one of these, membership or anything. But or a 501c3, a not-for-profit. But that's what this was, and the reason we had it is because of that question that you're asking, because there is no single woman or man that is the specialist in this area. No person is unto herself or himself an island here. But what can we do? Well, maybe we could bring people together and make the equivalent of like a dating app and a marriage counselor for the toe and flow. And that's
functional.
Seriously, that's what ALPS is. It's super simple. If you want me to describe this not-for-profit in that way, dating app, marriage counselor, mashed up. And that's going to
be the title of this podcast, by the way. Dating app.
Yeah, there you go. It'd be my absolute pleasure. Swipe left or swipe right. And I just say thumbs up, because what you're seeing now is this thing has already taken off, over 1,000 members, and it started during the pandemic. So it's crazy how this has taken off, and it's only on more of an upward sort of trajectory because of these questions that you're asking. Just trying to bring people together. And it's not natural. You guys know this. It's not natural to have different specialties together. It's easy to talk about on a podcast or from a lecture, from a podium, and it's hard in real life.
Yeah.
But just because it's hard doesn't mean it's not fun. And just because it's hard doesn't mean it's not worth a life's work, right? And it's and it is. It's worthwhile. And when you do that, and when you see it happen, and look, I'm preaching to the converted for you guys, but when you see it happen, there's something really life affirming about it, and it's been just terrific to watch this grow.
When we many years ago got the Hendelot group together in Latin America, one of the things that we quickly realized was that as we worked to develop these groups, we needed to put aside any elitist thoughts that only certain specialties or certain people should be the caregivers. Because, to your point exactly, there's not enough of us to go out there and take care of this. I don't want to get political, but it's, to certain things that have, kind of fireworks in the media and stuff like that, there's not enough of us out there. And even within the vascular surgeons, there's not enough vascular surgeons interested in doing this. And so in different areas in the world don't even have a vascular surgeon. I mean, there's hundreds of thousands of square kilometers around the world that don't have a vascular surgeon, where a nurse.
You can use metric or you can use imperial. It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
It could be agnostic.
It doesn't matter.
Metric or imperial, miles, kilometers. Bottom line is, though, you're right. And listen, and yes, there are situations where you have a woman or a man that will say, it's almost always a guy that will say, you know what, I don't do that, but you shouldn't do it either. Right. And right. That strikes me as so ridiculous. Yeah. You know, I mean, especially when it's like right, especially if it's the right thing to do. And sure, do you see that in some areas? Yes, but you know, you have to be kind of blissfully ignorant to that kind of thing, and just keep working. And you understand this, and you'll never. You'll never ultimately lose if you make it about the patient, right? Yeah. And that's what that's what we've always seen. Sure, little things here and there, depending on where you are in the world, and little things may be things you have to take up with the health ministry or something like this, depending on where you are. But the fact of the matter is that if you keep plugging away, it's like water, just drip, drip, drip in your irrigation. Or in your, or strictly by creating through just erosion, positive erosion, creating this chasm that you fill with people that care about the problem, and that is really the way forward until things break loose, and then you have this whole, you talk about life of flow. Flowing into the chasm is that flow, whereas at first there was nothing. But it takes a lot of time, and it is, especially to those of us for whom, you know, having, you know, accomplishments and having, you know, being instant gratification is part of your being. You know, you constantly want, you know, something that feels great. And this is the opposite of that, but you have to battle that natural instinct and just keep at it. And, you know, the politicians talk about staying on message. You just have to keep at it. And then all of a sudden someone comes up to you and goes, oh yeah, that was great, man. Wow. Awesome. Like overnight success, you know, in 20 years, right? Your 20-year overnight success. And we should all be so fortunate to stay at it. But if that is, I think, the truth. I think it's the truism for, I guess, succeeding in anything is persistence, and staying at it, right? And it's almost like a proverb.
I've recognized in this last 2 years of my life, I've been, you know, self-exploratory, transforming, reinventing.
Hopefully not self-immolating.
No. And I've tried to ask this question, you know, to myself many times: is what can we do other than talk about this? Because this is, my wife says, so let me explain the speaker circle. It's the same guys going around the world talking about the same things every time, and the answer is pretty much it. You just nailed it on. She's like, it's the same guys. It's Giacomo, it's you, it's David, and you're all talking about the same thing. And yes, because there is a very important part of this, which is drilling the point in, talking about it, getting the message out, reaching people. But then also I find myself in the middle of the night, on a sleepless night. What can I do? What is it that I can actually try to do other than just talking about these things? And two things come to mind, and I'd like your perspectives on these. One is centers of excellence, because we know of a lot of disease conditions in the American healthcare system that even have tied reimbursements to certain places. You can't do a cardiac transplant everywhere. Mm-hmm. You can't do cancer care everywhere. You can't do a carotid stent everywhere. There's places where you have to have certain expertise for these cases to be taken care of. One. And the other one is, how do we attempt to improve the misalignment of incentives? And the concept of value-based care comes to mind, which is very well used, especially in the nephrology community. Renal Care Programs of America right now are big CMS programs that go, a bunch of physicians go at risk, capitated models, and all these things. So, David, your thoughts on these two very centers of excellence and the potential of value-based care programs with some capitated models for the management of CLTI as a way to convert the future.
Miguel, you sort of had me at hello here. So, I mean, this was so number one.
I had you at self-exploratory.
But the point is, we were just talking about just a few minutes ago when I talked about those models where there are now criteria for these centers that exist. Now adopting them in the U.S. Still needs to be done. But as I said, coming in from Australia, these sorts of things exist. We have put these things together, and now maybe that's something that we try to push through with a multitude of institutions and societies backing it. But I think sometimes you just have to do it. And we've already identified, about 20 or 30 of these centers of excellence without the specific official definition around the United States. And there are certainly more than that. But those where we know that these certain things are being achieved for in terms of looking after patients. So these things exist now. We have to put it into a codified form and move forward on the value-based care. Absolutely. I mean, but in this area in limb preservation is one of the few areas where you can have a viable model, both in the most kind of sort of crass, widgetized, RVU-based, relative value unit-based care, per procedure kind of model, and you can win on the dramatic reductions, not only in high-level amputations and time to healing, but also length of stay, and sort of we would say ulcer-free, hospital-free, amputation-free, activity-rich days for our patients. And so that kind of idea is, without question, something that is now coming to the fore, going to insurance companies and talking to them about this kind of problem. And they would say, we don't have this problem. I don't even know what this problem is, whatever. We don't do this. We're not doing this. Or we cut it off, no problem. Or someone's going to change their insurance in 18 months and it doesn't bother us. Now it's the opposite. These insurance companies and health ministries are coming to us, which is exciting because we're now starting to see that, here is what you can do. And I think, as you said, Miguel, these centers of excellence, and they can be hub and spoke kind of referral-based units. We have already defined what we call kind of a level 3, a level 2, and a level 1 center, just like you'd have in trauma centers. And these sort of units already exist. We now have to codify them. We have to marry them with incentives for just like you said, value-based care. And once those things are aligned, Katie, bar the door. But this is already, I'm excited to say that although I'm frustrated day to day, I'm super excited kind of year to year.
We're getting closer?
Yes, that question.
I mean, how does someone start that process? Because recently we started a multidisciplinary conference where we invite, and it's right now it's just a conference. People come in, they have a good lunch, they listen through interesting cases. The idea being that it will birth, pathways, it will birth, improved algorithms and such to have these outcomes of less amputations, less length of stay, a better experience for the patient, improve outcomes. So how, from a nascent kind of physician-driven, administration is not that involved, do you take that to, okay, let's talk to administration, let's have them have buy-in into this concept of a center of excellence and the investment of time, capital, personnel, and such that goes with that?
So there's obviously you have to have some element of kind of top-down, either A, buy-in, or B, almost every unit that we've started has been with a combination of those kinds of that kind of thing. Literally, what we had when we got our initial kind of toe and flow unit started was just two clinicians that really cared about the problem, and just said, "Listen, we're going to do this, and we're going to." And we had a hospital that wasn't going to stop us from doing it, as long as we were hitting our sort of whatever these arbitrary numbers were, and we were looking after patients well. And what ended up happening is, at the end of just a year and a half, we saw without adding anything else other than a foot doctor to this kind of toe and flow program, there was not only a reduction in high-level amputations by just about half, but it was also a 33% increase in distal reconstructive procedures, a dramatic reduction in length of stay, and all the other clinicians around us got busier. They didn't get less busy. It wasn't like someone taking something from someone. There's this thought that it's like a zero-sum game, but in some of these things, it is not, with all of this. And then when we had these numbers, we started showing them, and other people started publishing these, and these data now exist, and you can find these. We're trying to put them all together at ALPS, but you can find them in the, from superb institutions around the United States and around the world, where you can have these, you can look at these numbers, and you can get so you can bring it into the front office with the nice carpeting and the nice furniture, and sit down with the C-suite and get buy-in, at least for a pilot from the beginning, even after you've gotten things started. And this discussion almost always is a success. I can't even think of times when it hasn't been successful, when you had women and men that were persistent and they really cared about the thing. And that's the thing. It's just having the people that care about that. And that's attractive to people because, when they see people having a good time, or at least working hard, and maybe not taking themselves seriously, but taking the work seriously, and they happen to be, and if they're good at what they do, God, it's all the better, but like in my case, it doesn't really matter if you're good at what you do. That doesn't, you don't even need that. You just, that's sort of the enthusiasm kind of supersedes it, I've found. And that sort of attracts people around you, and you just sort of drive that through. And if you have a cult of personality or two, if you're so fortunate, then you can use that in your institution. And the great thing now is you have folks like you guys who are superbly trained, who have already kind of seen this, and you've already seen how this can work.
One of the things I'll maybe you of course maybe you will remember. Dave's got thousands of publications, but there is one in particular that I really like. I forget where it was, but it was something along the lines of a blueprints of the development, and you go from very basic steps, identifying the players, because sometimes there may be a lot of political complexity. So you bring all these people to the table, and then you start organizing their lives and making it easy with something as simple as a foot hotline. And then, you tell the hospitalists and the ED and everybody, hey, this is the number, you page this number, and we're going to always, all as a team, come together, and then we're going to classify this patient. We're going to start talking the same language. and then we're going to decide, and then we're going to look at the non-invasives, and then we're all going to kind of pitch in. And as that becomes easier, people buy in. I forget where you put this out.
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about it. You can put it in the show notes, but but it's called 4 Steps to Success, actually, and you can. It's super simple. It's actually only 3, and then the fourth is kind of a screening. And we talk about things that you can measure in each one of those. But you go from the most acute problem in the hospital to the ED to the least acute on the 4th step, which is kind of in the community with screening. Because we're all better at urgent things as people. I think we respond better to urgent problems than we do to slow moving things, even though the slow moving things are what are more important over time, but the urgent is what we start with. So real quick, step 1, you want to develop, if you can, one number to call, and instead of like you said, a foot hotline, we call it a hot foot line. And so it's just like a bat phone, so I can call it. It's like calling for a code or, whatever, and when the ED has it, and the wards have it. So they know that if someone comes into your hospital ward or if they come in through the ED, there's just one number to call. And then your team, and whatever your team is going to descend on that patient in the ED, on the wards, and they're going to say, okay, and all the triage, by the way, you don't have to do anything. The ED doc, she or he, or the hospitalist or the nurse, they don't have to feel pulses. They don't have to say, is this infected? They don't have to say, oh, none of that. They don't have to order any tests. They just have to say, is there a wound on this patient that is kind of below the knee in someone with diabetes? And that's basically it. And then they get called in, and all the triage happens internally. So then the clinicians that descend on the extremity, hopefully together, but sometimes in this day and age, it may be hard to do that together. If one's in the OR, one's the clinic, one's somewhere else, and we decide what is dominant. If it is ischemia dominant, then the flow portion of this team is the primary. If it is infection dominant, then the tow portion of the team is primary. Often it's both, but so you argue about it. Whoever loses the argument is primary, and then the bottom line is then that infectious dominant problem is sorted out, or at least is addressed through source control, or the ischemia is, or sometimes both if you're sharing anesthesia on a case that you can time correctly. And then once those problems are sorted, then that person typically leaves the hospital with a wound. And so remember, we talk about Wi-Fi or Wi-Fi, wound, ischemia, and foot infection. Now you've sorted out the infection, you've sorted out the ischemia, at least in the urgent scenario. Now it's just a wound. So the person is discharged, and they are discharged from the hot foot line to the 2nd step. By the way, the hot foot line, the way you measure it is high to low amputation ratio. If you believe that a high amputation is worse than a foot sparing amputation, then a low number is better. When you look at that ratio, high to low, just like you look at an ABI, and you can look at length of stay, you can look at other factors associated with that. Then the person is discharged. They are discharged to a wound clinic, or typically it's a clinic where there's a tissue loss, or a wound clinic, and that clinic hopefully has tow and flow in it. The goal there is to get that patient healed as rapidly as possible. Your key metrics there, not just the readmission, not just high to low amputation ratio, but maybe time to healing and proportion of people healed. And then when that patient is healed, they're not healed because these patients recur a lot, whether you have intervened on them vascularly or whether you've intervened on them podiatrically. These patients are in remission. And our goal is to maximize their ischemia-free days, if you will, their hospital-free days, their ulcer-free days in remission. But we tell them that the chances of them getting another wound and our long life together is almost certain. And our goal is to make that wound or that ischemia as uncommon and as uncomplicated as possible. So we're going to intervene rapidly, surgically, medically, mechanically, as we need to reduce the risk of that and to keep them ulcer-free, ischemia-free, hospital-free. That's the thing with this remission clinic. And you can set it up a little differently than a wound clinic, although it can be the same clinic. It's just different times and different kind of, and different people in there at different times. Maybe you're going to have more people focusing on the toe portion of things and like shoes and insoles and dietitians.
Orthotists.
You're exactly right in that clinic. And then finally, the fourth step to success, if you will, is, well, how do I drive people from my hospital or my community or my county or my country into this clinic? And that's where you have these screening clinics. And you want to screen people, and we have 3-minute foot exams where people can get assessed rapidly and put into a risk category, none, mild, moderate, severe. That's and just like with Wi-Fi, you can do the same thing with risk for an ulcer or even limb threat, even when they don't have a wound. And then you can drive them in to another part of this center, be it if it's urgent, your hot foot, or a wound, or your remission clinic, or just seeing them and reducing the risk of them developing these problems based on that 3-minute exam. And those are your metrics for success as well, keeping people out of the hospital writ large.
And there you have it.
Yeah.
So
easy peasy.
Listen to this, read. No, we use AI, or we're going to try to use AI for episode notes. I hope everybody goes to them. Use these blueprints because they work. I've seen it over and over. We did it they did it in Arizona, then we did it at Baylor, and it repetitively works. Get the right people, get the right phone lines, get the right central, identify, follow up, publish, and people will come. David, I want to be responsible, reasonable with your time, and respectful with the fact that you have your wife waiting for you as per usual. Poor lady, always waiting for you to finish talking. Let me tell you, you are an inspiration to us all. Continue doing the work because we are following your lead, and hopefully the people out there are tickled by ALPS. Please, what's the webpage for ALPS for them to learn more and
I think
join
it's,
us?
It's limbpreservationsociety.org, limbpreservationsociety.org, or I think alpslimb.org if you want. But either one of those, just type in American Limb Preservation Society.
And you'll find us also on Twitter, and a lot of other perks, including the ability to go to the diabetic foot conference, DEFCON, that we just had an amazing 2023 event.
And by the way, today when we're recording is actually Edward James Olmos Day.
Oh, no way.
In LA County. And today is when we're recording, but it's pretty great, huh? Yeah.
He was there in person. He delivers.
There's
always
he hadn't been there for a few years because of the
every
pandemic.
year.
Really?
Yeah, Giacomo Clerici got it this year for his work through
wow.
many years. David, thank you very much for your time, and to all of you out there, I hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. I appreciate you, my to amigo.
Thank you, David.
Amigo, es un placer. You guys,
bye. Pura vida.
take care, you guys. Ciao, ciao. I'm out of here.
Bye-bye.